what is today? June 18th, 2023, Father's Day. Here's what we have so far. I looked up Mark Wood's article. He's a reporter for the Florida Times Union. He had an article where he crossed the entire city on foot, neighborhood by neighborhood. And he interviewed Susan Lisa, Lisa, King, King, who grew up in the Gator Inn. I ran into this information because I went to the book mine and I bought Ann Rule's book a few years ago. And as I was checking out the young girl, who looked like the girl in Harry Potter, by the way, something like that, bookish, blackish brown hair, rimmed glasses, I call spicy looking, short. And she said my mom met him when she was a child. She grew up in the Gator Inn. My grandparents owned the Gator Inn, and he was there. Okay. All right. I said, oh, that's wild. I said, we ran into him once too. And then I went on because there were people in line and I didn't pursue it. She's long gone from Chamberlain Book Mine. The mother ran for city council and is very prominent. I got an email from Mark Woods. She has not responded. I have an article in Times Union. I'm trying to contact her or her sister. Okay. The father died in 1972, the man that owned the Gator Inn, where all this occurred. I looked up the term a few years. In the article, it says the motel was sold in a few years after his death. Legally, a few years is 3 years. I mean, that's the term. It said, what does a few years mean? It means, in legal terms, it's about 3 years. That makes sense because you got a lot of paperwork to do. Maybe you tried to run it for a year. That would bring it to 75 or 76. Notice, this is before 1978. Of course, it could have been in 1968 when he was about 21 and a half and was coming up from the GOP convention in Miami. Maybe he drove back and just stopped in Jacksonville. I don't know. Another thing is they had a lounge. Debbie's mother was an organist and a maitre d' at the Red Heart about 5 miles away. Could she have moonlighted? I know she moonlighted at the Mayport Naval Air Station Club. So she would moonlight trying to bring in extra money. Okay. So I have 3 questions for Lisa King. Approximately what year? Now, she said my mom was a child. I looked that up. Toddler is like 1 to 3. A child girl before menses is 4 to about 11 or 12. 4 to 13, whenever menses is. So a child. So she could be from 4 to 12. Okay. And then a young lady is supposedly 12 on up to, 20s, I guess. But she was born in 1960 or 61. So for her to be a child of 8 or 9, that could be 68. But it could be 70, 71, 72. I don't know. All I know is they sold the motel after the father died in 72 in a few years. Reasonably speaking, that's 3 or 4 years. So that would be 75 or 76. That gives him time to be here when some of the girls went missing in August of September of 1974. We had girls go missing in August and September, 5 little girls. 2 or 3 of them went out with a killer called the Casanova Killer, John Paul Knowles. They even described him. He had blonde hair, and he looked kind of like a blonde Elvis. That was him. The girl on the south side, Virginia Helms, I believe, she was 12. She lived off of Beach Boulevard. That's not very far. It's a straight run from the Gator Inn. It's a straight run from the Gator Inn. If he was there in 74, now you say, but the detective said, yeah, but he was busy killing people in Salt Lake City and stuff at the time. Before and after that date, there were people that went missing, blah, blah, blah. And his timeline shows he bought Murray Gas the 25th and 27th. I said, you know what? When he left Seattle and Tacoma, the month, and a serial killer who's had all those killings, and he knows they're after him because of Lake Sammamish, which was in July of that year. And he knows they know about a Ted, they know about a beige Volkswagen. He worked at the Department of Emergency Services in Seattle, where Carol Boone worked. Somebody from there reported him to Popo. So that month, in his last week, he says, Liz, I'm going to use your vote. I don't remember the reason, but he told Liz Clover he was going to use her Volkswagen, which was a bluish seafoam green Volkswagen. And then I guess he made a highlight. Oh, that's my car out there. See, it's not beige. I'm not the guy. So he made a point of that. And he said, well, how did Liz get by with his Volkswagen? He let her use his credit card. Now, how that worked, I don't know. But it's in her book, the end of chapter 8. She says she had filled his car up a couple times with a Chevrolet. It's just a real aside. She just said, how did she do that? She used his credit card. So unfortunately, Mr. Fisher, he had other tricks up his sleeve. If when he went to Utah, he had a boatload of money. Liz was underwriting him. Carol Boone may have been divorced and gave him a third of her lump sum award. The man was older. He was he wasn't responsible for Jamie because that wasn't his son. But to get out of a bad marriage, he may have just given her a lump sum of money and said, okay, amicable divorce, here's $10,000, which would probably be worth about $50,000 or $60,000. All she had to do is give Bundy a few $1,000s. Out of her 10, she still would have 5 or 6. She was a ding, but she was trying to win him too. Plus, Liz had gotten finally to go to Utah. She wanted to become a Mormon. Her father was an orthodontist, for God's sake, and he had made pretty good money at that Department of Emergency. So he had a boatload of money, and he learned how to use that credit. Let somebody else use his credit card. So those 2 gas purchases in the 25th and 27th, he could have very easily flown down to Jack's to try to make up for missing me and Debbie. He didn't get us, and he was going to go back to get us, I think. Virginia Helms was seen in the National Forest on the north side of Jack's in a red Volkswagen. A couple saw a stranded red Volkswagen, a tall, lanky guy. They went over to see, they thought it was broken down, and they went over to see if they could help. They walked around the back of the vehicle, and a little girl who appeared to be Virginia Helms in their mind was dazed, and her eyes were darting back and forth. She couldn't seem to get off of the floorboard. She was on her knees in the back of the Volkswagen. The guy suddenly dashed around the vehicle. He dropped a golf bag, which Jacksonville Sheriff's Office probably still has, and made it out of there. So they didn't help him. They don't know what it was. But when they began to read the articles about the missing girl, to them, it looked like her. Okay. Red Volkswagen. And I don't know. Also, Richard, who would have been 12 or 13 in that period, because he's younger than us, said that he had gone, like Glenn took his brother to Utah and helped him there with the white truck and the Volkswagen and helped him unpack and do all this, who would have been our age in his early 20s, I guess. And then he went back. Richard, as a jealous younger sibling, wanted to spend some time with him too, so he went. But he said he remembers the trip was shut abruptly at the airport, and he could see his brother's reflection in the window, and he looked disgusted and frightened or something, very concerned. And he said, I don't know what it was about, but he said maybe that urge was coming on him. Well, he's at the airport, and if it was in Utah when he was taking him back, sending him back on the plane, 12 or 13, going back, I've got something I got to take care of. So, yes, if she saw him around 74, then, hey, I wish we could get a DNA test on that duffel bag. All right. Thank you. And I wish Miss Lisa would call or something. I've got an ad in the newspaper next week. It shouldn't be that hard to get hold of her. Now, Mark Woods, the reporter, gave me an email, but so far no response. It could be an old email address, but it didn't come back. All right. This is a night. I'm sick of this. I'm personally tired of it. If Debbie has 2 daughters, and Debbie has 2 sisters, Jeannie would be 75 now, Vicki would be about 72, and Debbie and I are 68, and she has 2 daughters of her marriage. Somebody, some friend, somebody, and I'm tired of saying, well, we did interview her, and she just rolls her eyes and acts like you're a Signal 27. I'm tired of it. Something happened. And if there's a homicide involved, then it's too bad. Tough stuff, All right, thank you.